Motivated by greed and his own self-interest, Edward Strand betrayed not only his friend and employer Dr. Patel, but the entire ethos of the institution he worked for. North Canberra Medical places respectful relationships, trust, and a sense of family at the centre of its practice. Between July 2018 and August 2020, Mr. Strand acted in a way that was incompatible with these core values and breached his duty as a financial manager. He made 76 unauthorized payments to himself, totaling $55,079.85. These three counts of obtaining property by deception, for which he is guilty, each carry a maximum penalty of 10 years, a fine of $160,000, or both. In determining the objective seriousness of the matter, I would like to direct your attention to the significant value taken, the extended period of offending, and most significantly, the breach of trust involved. The long period of offending and attempts to conceal the transaction show premeditation and a lack of impulsivity. The modus operandi was not particularly sophisticated, but Mr. Strand took steps to conceal his offending, which was only uncovered when the victim engaged an expert financial auditor. His actions caused significant financial hardship to the clinic. However, the key aggravating feature in this case is the extreme breach of trust by the offender. Mr. Strand was one of only two people to have access to the bank account and the only person employed to directly oversee the practice's finances. Behind the company are flesh and blood human beings who suffered. I would like to direct Your Honour's attention to the victim impact statement. Dr. Patel considered Mr. Strand a friend. His egregious betrayal of trust has had significant impact on her personally and the morale of the entire staff and its ability to provide the caring patient services it is known for. In this case, the court must make it clear to those who are willing to commit similar offences that significant breaches of trust of employers to misappropriate funds can expect real punishment. Finally, Your Honour, Mr. Strand has attributed his offending to a gambling addiction, which became unmanageable after his father's death. While motivation is a relevant consideration, the case law is clear that gambling addiction is not in itself a mitigating factor. Mr. Strand has lived a comfortable and privileged life. Until his departure from North Canberra Medical, he has had secure employment since graduating his tertiary degree. He has a limited criminal history, which is not particularly relevant to this matter, but in considering the good character evidence in front of Your Honour, including the letter from his mother, I would like to direct your attention, Your Honour, to the Crown against Horton, which stands for the proposition that prior good character is to be given less weight in circumstances where a breach of trust occurs over a lengthy period of time. In many ways, it was this history of good character that enabled the crimes. Mr. Strand has a 13-year-old daughter for whom he is the primary carer and has joint parental responsibility with his ex-wife. The potential hardship to the family can be a relevant consideration, but this is not a case of exceptional hardship. In a case like this, the need to adequately punish the offender to deter other like-minded people from committing similar offences leaves little scope for leniency based on the potential adverse effects or family hardship. To assist the court in determining the correct sentence, I would like to provide two comparative cases. The first is the Queen and against QU. In QU, the offender was a 48-year-old woman who had serious drug and gambling addictions. It was suggested that these were partially the result of being the victim of repeated sexual assault by a relative during her childhood. She used her position as a financial officer to obtain just over $160,000 in a 2-year period. The serious and significant financial impact on the victim, the breach of trust, and the length of time of offending were all important factors in this case. Because the defendant pled guilty, she received a 25% reduction. Notably here, she made significant progress in rehabilitation of her drug and gambling addictions in the 5-year delay between the offending and the sentencing. She attended weekly counselling meetings and had not engaged in gambling or used drugs in 2 years prior to sentencing. She was gainfully employed and had removed many of the negative influences that put her at risk of reoffending. These factors, in conjunction with her genuine remorse and low likelihood of recidivism, made an ICO appropriate despite the need for specific deterrence. Overall, the sentence was 3 years, taking into account concurrence and accumulation. A conviction was recorded, and the judge imposed core conditions and 2 additional conditions that related to preventing illicit substance relapses and ongoing mental health support. The second case I would like to draw your attention to is the Queen against Reed. The offender pled guilty on the 5th mention to 7 counts of dishonestly obtaining property by deception. For his early plea, he also received a 25% reduction. The offender was a bank manager who used his position to take money from the accounts of 4 individuals, with the total loss suffered just over $338,000. The offender was ordered to pay back the total amount and served a total of 3 years, 2 months imprisonment, consisting of 8 months in full-time custody, followed by a suspended sentence under good behaviour order. Returning to Mr. Strand, the pre-sentencing report states that gambling is the defendant's primary crimogenic risk, and if he continues his apparent commitment to addressing his gambling behaviour, his risk of offending will be reduced. Where a person has good prospects of rehabilitation, the court can support those prospects in sentencing and thereby address the likely future harm to community. The letter provided by Mr. Rotham highlights the positive steps taken so far, but critically, that Mr. Strand is not yet in remission. I put it to Your Honour that Mr. Strand can be distinguished from the offender in QU because of the greater need to address specific deterrence, because of Mr. Strand's higher risk of reoffending and that he has not overcome his primary crimogenic risk yet. Additionally, there is real doubt surrounding the genuineness of Mr. Strand's remorse, as evidenced by his attempts to justify his actions, making him more similar to the offender in Reed. To conclude, Your Honour, Mr. Strand acted with premeditation to breach the trust of his employer and abuse his position. While acknowledging the utilitarian value of his guilty plea, it was a few weeks before the trial and the prosecution had a very strong case. Nothing less than a conviction of full-time imprisonment will be adequate to achieve the specific and general deterrence and show the seriousness with which the court considers this crime. Neither the hardship to his family or the gambling habits are mitigating. However, keeping all of this in mind, the best way to support the positive steps taken by Mr. Reed would be a partially suspended sentence, partially concurrent, with a good behaviour order and conditions that Mr. Strand continues to seek help in relation to his gambling disorder and grief surrounding the death of his father. Thank you.